Welcome to Ready, Set, Real Estate, where we will help empower and educate you on many different aspects of real estate, finance, and investing. Each week, we will expand your knowledge and uncover hidden truths. We will break down real-world scenarios and study actual how-to strategies. Anyone can buy real estate, but together we'll ensure you make smart real estate investment decisions. Now, here's your host, award-winning author, international speaker, and real estate educator, Lisa Gillett.
Happy Wednesday, you beautiful people, wherever you are on this phenomenal planet. It was my escrow officer was calling me, and we're working through. Sometimes kinks pop up in the deals, and I realized when I hung up, I was like, oh my gosh, it's showtime. Let's get to the show. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to your favorite real estate podcast. Gosh, my lighting's it's so dark. Okay, is that better? I guess if I took off my hat, then I could, I could feel like I'm seen. Can you see me? All right, we are in episode 267. Let me just drop the caption real quick over here. We are talking about mom and pop landlords cashing out. Let me bring up you know what? Boom, 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 boom. That's what we're talking about today, people. Mom and pop landlords cashing out with yours truly, the one and only Lisa Gillett, super agent. I feel so bare when I don't have a hat on, so I'm going to put my hat back on. Hot. Make sure you get your Ready, Set, Real Estate swag. Let folks know you're out here. You're a zealot. You are a zealot for real estate literacy, empowerment, and education. That's what this is about. Okay, what am I doing here? Let me just copy this real quick. I'm going to throw this over here. I'm going to pin this over on Instagram. Shout out to our folks who are on IG, streaming on Meta. Even though my platform has like the Facebook icon, it's Meta, LinkedIn, YouTube, on the YouTube, and who else? IG. That's where we're streaming, and we repost or we play the. I'm so tongue tied right now. We replay the episode on Spotify, and that gets to your favorite podcast platforms. Okay, this is what we're talking about, people. Before I do that, let me just do this real quick. Okay, bring it back. Let's talk about quarterly goals here. Quarterly goals. It's now second quarter, quarterly goals. And what have you been working on, right? What have you been working on? The beautiful thing is we're still early in the fiscal year. We're early enough in the game for you to be able to set new goals. If you didn't make the cutoff for putting the goals in for last year, don't worry. You still have time. Okay. You still have time. Let me do this real quick. Boom. Okay. You still have time. I have to adjust my camera. There we go. Last week, we talked about the importance of checking your credit on the 3 credit bureaus. We talked about the new scoring system that has been approved. So now there's a competitor in terms of when you look for applying for a loan. There's now the Vantage score that will also be used to determine your credit worthiness when you apply for a mortgage or home loan, or for, like I said, mortgage on real property. So that's excellent news, because now we have a competitor out there. And for a long time, you only used one scoring system. So this is supposed to pass on a savings to the industry professionals, the lending industry, along with consumers as well, because those charges or costs are passed to you too as well. So that's great. What else is new? Let's see. So we talked about credit scoring, savings. For those of you who haven't heard me say this, I know I've shared this with you more so offline with my clients. And when we talk about strategic lending, I believe, so pay attention to me right now. This is so important. And if you don't hear anything else after this show, make sure you receive this gold nugget, this real estate gem right here. This gem right here is about relationship lending. Okay, so typically what you expect in terms of best rates and best loan options are going to be in terms of a hierarchy from top to, let's say, top tier, and then going down to least best. So number one in terms of lending and looking for loans is your VA loan. So if you're a veteran, we always ask our clients, listen here, if you are a veteran, take advantage of the VA loan. You are going to get the best rate available in the market, VA loans. Then second, you will see going with credit unions. Credit unions are there for the members, not necessarily shareholders. So they will give you great rates. They'll give you some closing cost credits, but closing cost credits. They'll give you some assistance, they'll pay for an appraisal. So go that route. Then my third is my common and preferred option for those who are not veterans, even though we could still do VA loans. When we go with our lender partners or direct lending partners who is really about relationship lending. It is so important. I cannot stress how relationship lending is so important. If you get denied by institutional banks, you've got to get with the lenders, the direct lenders who are in the business of doing loans, So that is important. And then your last resort, you go to your institution. Here's what is common. It's common for you to go directly to your bank because that's who holds your money, right? Depository institutions. I prefer to go to them last because they have a very heavy underwriting, very strict underwriting guidelines in terms of you looking good on paper. So if you've got some blemishes on your credit, if you've not been consistent with work, or you've got multiple jobs like 1099s, freelance work, gig work, and things like that, then you may not want to necessarily start with a depository institution for a mortgage loan. You want to go with direct lender again. Who did I say first? If you VA, go that route. Use the VA loans. Secondary, check with your credit union. If you work for city, county employer, they have credit unions. If they offer loans, not all credit unions do loans. So go with your lender. That's great. Hey, Keith Johnson, how you doing? He says, keep shining bright, Starlight. Appreciate that. Absolutely. I'm shining. I am shining. And so you want to make sure you take advantage of relationship lending. That's important. Okay. So important with the relationship lending. Okay. And then last, depository institutions. Now, if you want more tips on that, send me a text 323-488-3265. I am not a mortgage broker. I do have insight and experience in it. And then I connect you with the team. I connect you with our preferred lender partners. who are in the business of doing loans, who also we also have partnerships with credit union loan officers as well, and we also have connections with depository banks. So and I've said this before, and take advantage when you start to see they're giving out money, because depository institutions have been caught doing bad things, right? Like engaging in discriminatory practices, and then they're now giving away $30,000 and $60,000 in home down payment assistance and closing costs, and creating niche products with no private mortgage insurance and very competitive interest rates. It's going to be difficult for our direct lender partners to compete with that, but it's definitely worth a shot if you can qualify for those loans and those niche loan products. Mind you, they do not offer those products all year round. It's good press, and it's save face, right? For having done something bad, having had to pay $1 million fines, and then they have to come and actually give loans to Black and Brown community members and those who are in the underrepresented or underserved communities. That's how that happens, truth be told. Okay, so that's my tip here. That's what we're going to get here in terms of our real estate goals for 2026. We just kicked off April Fool's Day, and no, that was not an April Fool's joke. That was all good real estate gems there. Like I said, if it was good, drop a mic. Let me know that right there was helpful. Press 1, by the way, lets me know you're here. Press 2 lets me know you shared it. Sharing is caring. Let's really encourage folks to really start to get educated on real estate. We like to lead with education, so our clients, consumers, you all listeners, family, friends, and the whole tribe and collective have the information to make informed decisions. That's our goal here. This is where I get to let my hair down. Look, I get to let my hair down and not have to be so serious in terms of the nature of the business. Here I get to have fun, and I get to talk with you, and we get to just chit chat about real estate stuff. And today, yep, you've got it. Today, we are going to be talking about mom and pop landlords cashing out, because folks are not talking about this. Folks are not talking about what is happening out here. Boo! Exactly. Let's bring that again. If you're not listening, if you're not talking about this, about what's happening in the world of real estate with mom and pop landlords post pandemic, you are not helping. Folks need our help. Hugh Williams, what's going on? He says, great info. Thanks for stopping in and stopping by. I really like what you're doing on IG, man. It's great to see your face on camera. You're usually behind the camera, so it's great to have you in right up close and personal, right? Professional, up and close and professional. So it's great to have you on here, dropping in a line real quick. You know what? I think you've been talking about mom and pop landlords. In fact, you've been talking about landlord stuff and tenant stuff. So this would be a good dialogue as well to continue on in terms of what's going on in the industry. So I did want to give disclaimer before we continue this dialogue. So before we chit chat and we continue on about the world of landlord, mom and pop landlords, let's talk about real quick what this show is not about. Okay, this information provided on the show should not be considered legal or tax advice. Please seek legal and tax advice from reputable licensed professionals. But Lisa, you said no. I said to go seek legal and tax advice from the reputable licensed professionals. I do this here for edutainment. Unless you come to me regarding your specific situation and I know what's going on, then I can give you advice and recommendation based on my experience and my expertise. And I will most always defer to legal counsel for some specific situations that require legal advice and tax tax advice as well. They're so interconnected in our industry. You cannot not say, hey, by the way, you need to talk to a tax professional, or hey, by the way, I know this, and that, but you need to talk to a lawyer or seek legal counsel. It's amazing that we've got to do that all the time. Okay. All right. So, with that being said, we've knocked out disclaimers and all that fun stuff. Guess what? Shameless plug, shameless plug. We're going to be right back after this sponsor break, and we're going to get into what's really going out post pandemic, because mom and pop landlords are cashing out, and it's not for reasons that you think. It is not for reasons that you think. Some, yeah, want to buy the RV and go travel the world, but not everybody is cashing out for those reasons. And we're going to talk about that when we come right back after this sponsor break.
We know how challenging it can be to try and sell a home while also dealing with other financial and legal matters. We're here to help. Devenio Estates is the real estate firm you need to make sure your unique situation is handled as quickly and efficiently as possible. Our team of professionals has a combined experience of over 30 years in real estate, construction, and finance industries. As active professionals in the industry, we know the importance of timelines and pride ourselves in providing superior service without compromising integrity. We use industry software and copyrighted proposals so that our real estate agents submit accurate and complete listing information and buyer offers. Our goal is to exceed your expectations and set Devenio Estates as the go-to real estate firm for excellence in advocacy and superior services for our clients. Contact us today to learn more about our services.
Very good. Welcome back. Thanks for hanging with us. If you're new to the show, guess what? You're looking to the number one best real estate podcast out there. Yes, I said it. I said it. I could say that. I could say that. No. And you probably know this too, because we've been rocking for some years now. For some years, okay? So listen, we're going to do conversational style today. We won't do classroom style. I don't have slides for you because I really just want to get in here and just have this conversation of what we are observing in the market. So you remember that thing called COVID? Yeah, a couple years ago, we were on lockdown. And how many of you, by show of hands, press 1 in the comment if you've noticed your towns, your cities, your communities turn into ghost towns. You've noticed that the commercial properties, right? And I've been talking about this some time. Not many people are really seeing what's happening in the background, but there's an all-time high in foreclosures happening with commercial property. A lot of deals being cut behind the scenes so that we don't have a repeat of the financial crisis from 2007, 2008. So we are starting to see a lot of that happening in the background. That's what the pandemic did, right? Folks didn't return back to home. But here is what is being quietly kept, is that the mom and pop landlords who had to carry the weight of housing tenants. And hey, I'm not throwing shade here, but let's call it what it is. There were some folks who said, you know what? You mean I don't have to pay rent because there's a moratorium, even though I can or could pay my rent? You mean I don't have to pay my rent? If you are in a state like California, there was a moratorium here on rent. Not only did tenants not have to pay rents, but landlords could not put them out for non-payment of rents. And people feel like we've moved on, that we've solved the problem once we lifted the moratorium, and that there was federal funding that came down to each state, and it was allowed to, help mom and pop landlords get the back rents. But guess what's happened? Not everybody applied for the back rents. Not everybody qualified for the back rents. And mom and pop landlords who own multiple properties weren't able to collect on all those properties, right? In terms of back rents. We've had mom and pop landlords having to exhaust their retirement savings to maintain those properties for the couple years. Because I think here in California, we had almost a 3 to 4 year moratorium. And then the entire state of California went under rent control because there's 4 levels of rent control. There's state, right? There's the federal, the state. This is what federal mandated. Then the state mandated their own, and then county mandated their own, and then the city mandated their own. So if you're if you're not in a city with rent control, but you're in an unincorporated area, then that means you fall under the LA County, not the LA County, but the county rent control, right? Because these are some areas and some cities don't have rent control. They're like, we don't have rent control, but I have to remind folks that means if you don't have a city rent control, that means you fall under the county rent control. And then there's the state rent control. You see what I'm getting at here is that there are tenant protections, the residue that remained post-pandemic. We are feeling the effects. And I can go on the MLS, the multiple listing service, right now. In fact, I was blown away because I've got clients looking for income properties. And that's great. It's a good thing. We've got folks who want to buy multifamily. And I was blown away to see how many properties, multifamily units, are on the market. And what are we seeing? We're seeing a couple of these properties are in substandard conditions. We are seeing some of these properties with low rents. We are seeing some of these properties with no rent, meaning they're non-performing tenants. We've got some really bad situations that mom and pop landlords are dealing with. And guess what? Who can blame them to say, I'm done? I'm cashing out my money and I'm done with dealing with tenants. I'm done with dealing with these new landlord tenant laws. You know, I can't do anything anymore. I can't put them out. There's now no fault eviction protections, and the relocation assistance for city, state is pretty penny. You may say or hear, and you may think that I'm for one side versus the other side. Not necessarily. I'm not for people who take advantage of other people. For instance, if you knew that you could cover your rent, but you decided to take advantage of the moratorium and you didn't pay your rent, you affected and you hurt and you took advantage of someone else who was providing housing for you and or your family. And they needed those funds to provide for their family. So I'm not into taking advantage of people. So that's the tone you hear here in my being facetious, or however I am sharing in discussing the landlord-tenant dynamic. It's so funny in law school, and folks were like, "Oh, great, you could do landlord-tenant law." No thanks, no thanks. Not with all the complexities going on in landlord-tenant law, and more specifically, as we talk about what's also made that difficult. The state of California now they've approved funding for attorneys to represent as defense counsel tenant representation in unlawful detainer actions. Those are eviction actions. So if the tenant qualifies, oftentimes in these areas that we're starting to see the uptick of where mom and pop landlords are cashing out, we are starting to see more tenants are fighting back, and they have the resources and the team because attorneys now are representing those tenants in those situations. So what is happening? The argument has been it is to create a level playing field for both sides. It allows the UD, right, the unlawful detainer actions to process more smoothly, quickly, oftentimes settling, not having to go to trial, so that the parties can come to an agreement. And I'm all for that. I'm all for, so we are more transparent, that it's fair, that we can come to an agreement, because we've been there, right, Hugh? If you're still on, we've been there where tenants do not. They just don't get it. And everyone is talking with their friend about what the friend did and how much money the friend got when they moved out. But your friend's situation may not be your situation. And so it may not be applicable. There are some rules that may not justify you getting relocation money. Do your research, do your homework. Not everybody qualifies, not everyone's eligible. Just because you live there doesn't mean you get the money to be paid to move out. Nope, that's not how that works. Now, it'd be a show of good faith, right? We do what is called a cash for keys, and we say, hey, yeah, let's work something out. He's laughing. Let's work something out, and let's come up with cash for keys. But depending on what city you're in or whether the county rules apply, the cash for keys agreements have to be filed and recorded with those local agencies. The cash for keys agreement have to be recorded just to make sure that the tenant got a fair deal. They didn't get the short end of the stick, kind of. So that makes liquidating, that makes selling multi-units, or not even multi-units, single family properties, quite a challenge. Back in the day, back in the day now refers to pre-pandemic. Back in the day, single family properties were exempt from relocation assistance, meaning you had another home, and that's common. People buy their starter home, and life improves, situation improves over the years. They buy another home, and then they rent the starter home, and so that's probably all they have, and they've been managing this starter home or that as a rental. And pre-pandemic, if you decided you wanted to sell that rental, you would then give the tenant notice, and they would move on, and everyone would go on with their lives. Pre-pandemic, back in the day, way back in the day. Not anymore. Now, I just talked to one of my investors the other day, and they picked up a single family property. They're looking to develop the lot for multi-units, and they had to pay a pretty penny. I'm not going to say the number because you guys would think, if I say the number, you're going to think that you're owed that number too. So I'm not going to say the number, but let's say he was not happy. They had to litigate. They had to go all the way to court. They fought back, attorney fees involved, and it was pricey to get the folks out of the property. So I just want to share a light, right? We're shining a light on mom and pop landlords today, that it is an uber sensitive, very stressful matter and situation. And it's not that they're cashing out because they're going to go buy the RV and trek the world, right? To go retirement living. No, because for some of those families, the plan has always been to pass on the property, the rental property, to their children. That's not even an option now. Why? Is because the cost of living, the cost to maintain the property, not being able to increase rents, because if you're in a certain city, you only get 3%. I believe this year is 3%. Last year was 4%. And under the new laws, you can no longer include utilities, right? Cost of utilities. You can't include it in the percentage anymore as a percent increase. Can't do that anymore. So you don't get to offset as much as you think. If you do improvements, you only get about 90 or 100 bucks. I think it is. It translates to about $90 to $100 more in the rent for home improvements or property improvements to the rental unit. But that's not significant, especially when you're talking about market rents of what they are today versus what we look at mom and pop landlords who were fine back pre-pandemic, right? We were fine back in the day when you could collect $1,000, $700. I'll give you an example. It seems I keep seeing rents at $700 right now for one bedrooms. Can you imagine? $700 for a one bedroom. Where do they do that? Not in California. Not in California. Market rent about $1,900 for one bedroom, and that could be a specific zip code type thing. That's minimum, right? You probably can get a deal at $1,500, depending. but we're talking about like a whole unit, right? Courtyard, you got backyard, you've got driveway, you got a whole little casita, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, dining room, kitchen, that whole living room, whole thing for 700 uh, is a common number I'm seeing of mom and pop landlords not having kept up with increasing rents over time. And we know why. So here's what's happened. We know why that's happened for oh so long is because landlords did one of two things. They have not registered the properties with the rent registry as required. So they're trying to keep it on a hush. You want to keep the money under the table. I'm gonna say how that hurts you, because you are keeping money. You think you're winning because you're collecting the rents under the table, but then you decide, hey, this is starting to become costly, right? Capital expenditures. What are those things? Capital expenditures are, for example, you've got to replace the roof. That just wipes out all the rent that you probably collected for the last 5 years at $700 per month, because now you've got to replace the roof. Get a busted pipe. You've got that, get a tree. We've got tons of trees sitting out in the front yard. We know that the roots love to follow water, so they're going to follow the sewer line, intrude into the sewer line. Boom, you've got busted pipe. Now you got to replace the sewer line. Now we're looking at a couple $1,000s as well. So again, another expense that wipes out the rents that you've collected for the last 2 to 3 years. If you have not been budgeting properly or managing your finances properly, it's easy through a capital expenditure to wipe out what you've been collecting over those years. So let me get back to this. You've not raised the rents as a mom and pop landlord because you really like your tenants. You really like them and they pay on time, so you don't want to bother them with raising rents. But you also know you've not really been maintaining that property as you should. So everybody is kind of offsetting their responsibilities. The tenant says, well, I don't really ask my landlord to fix anything because I don't want them to then raise my rent. I've seen this in commercial properties as well. I went to a restaurant in the community and noted their entire ceiling was falling off, and they've been renting the place for many, many years, and they've been paying low rents. And guess what? They don't want to bother the landlord about fixing the ceiling or the roof because they're scared that the landlord's going to say, aha, now I have to charge you more rent because I have to fix the ceiling. It's like, commercial property is a bit different, but residential property will require this thing called habitability. Let's talk about the H word. This thing called habitability is a requirement. This is something silent in a lease agreement, or even if there's no lease agreement, this is a silent expectation of what the seller will provide. Excuse me, not the seller, but the landlord will provide to the tenant occupant, is this thing called habitability, that this place will be in safe and healthy, livable conditions. So let's go back to what we're seeing. And now it's coming up to the surface for those of you who've been doing this for the last 20, 30 years. And you may be listening because you might be an heir to the mom and pop landlord situation. Your folks have passed on, you've inherited the rental property, and now you're like, my dad or my mom, they just never raised the rents, and they never fixed anything over there. And so here's what we're seeing. We're seeing tenants go unchecked. What does that mean? They've taken over the property. Illegal, not illegal, but unpermitted modifications, unpermitted structures. They've got more folks living in the unit than they said that they've agreed to on the lease, or if there's a verbal arrangement, there's more folks. There's no stipulations of how much more will you be paying for more bodies in that property, right? And that's what we're seeing surface. So then when you say to us, right, the agent, I want $1 million for my property, and I now have to say, well, great, let's look at the rent roll. Let's look at your rent roll. Let's look at your P&L, profit and loss statement. Let's look at what is it costing you? Let's look at what's the condition of the roof. When's the last time you replaced the water heater? When have you, you get where I'm going with this? You want a certain price, a perceived value for the property, but the value does not equate to the condition of the property, because now you've got low rents, you've got a property in pretty bad shape, and then we're under rent control, which means it's going to cost us if we want to maximize the property, because we may potentially have to negotiate relocating tenants. And I get it. Oh, my tenants want to stay. They don't want to go anywhere. You know, they've been really great. Great. But at $700, that's not really going to help the buyer, the new buyer, offset the cost of their mortgage, their monthly mortgage. $700. It helps, you know, but it's like, needle in a haystack. It's very small compared to, let's say, 1,500, 1,900 market rents. That's significant to a $3,000 mortgage, $4,000 mortgage, $5,000 mortgage, depending how many units, depending how much the down payment is, depending on the price point, depending on the rates. Got it? That's what I'm seeing here. So on the flip side, I'm speaking to what we're seeing on the flip side. Yes, what does that mean? It means someone's desperate situation creates opportunity for someone else. That is the reality of real estate, that life events triggers real estate needs, and that's what we're faced with today. Someone's desperate situation that I want to cash out because I'm done. It's been my favorite word these last days. I'm done. I'm done. Creates an opportunity for buyers, investors, developers, right? Owner occupants. Let me classify, because they're all buyers. Type of buyers: owner occupied. That means someone looking to move in one unit, rent the other unit out. We're talking about extended family situations where it makes sense to buy a duplex so that the extended families can each have their own shared space, and they chip in to cover the mortgage. You're not going to get a scenario where a buyer, whether owner occupant, an investor, and or developer, is willing to take on your tenant who has low market rents and who also has taken over the property and has done unpermitted modifications. And so this is why it's important. And check out Hugh's Instagram, you guys, because he's been talking about the landlord tenant stuff. It's important to put in your a provision in your lease clause that you are going to check your unit regularly. Hugh, do you remember a couple years ago when the landlord had not checked the house in 19 years? They partitioned the entire house. They drywalled every single the living room was drywalled. Every single place in that house was drywalled because there were so many people living in the property. I think we also had a listing out in Lafayette area, the country club area. I remember that. That was partitioned into like 16 rooms. Incredible. So Hugh says some tenants are now relocating frequently, signing one-year leases as they move from place to place. They often seek to benefit from move-out incentives in specific areas where they are well-versed in local rental laws. So we're talking about the serial tenant. That's a real thing. Be cautious of the serial tenant who is out here gaming. Oh my goodness. That just leads me to talk about, I'm going to touch on it here, but I'm going to come back and talk about this episode. I think I talked about it. There is a Section 8 tenant recipient, voucher recipient, who has filed lawsuits against many agents because they are not aware of the updated laws that you cannot discriminate against source of income, meaning if someone is using Section 8 as a source of income, income to pay for towards the rent, you cannot deny them if they are eligible. You cannot deny them approval of the unit if they meet all other eligibility criteria. And she's out here suing folks. Some folks say it's a money grab. So again, this is why mom and pop landlords are cashing out, because this has created abuse by some tenants. They are abusing the system, and you get the good with the bad. The laws were well intended to protect people from being displaced. I agree with that. That's a tough thing. This is why we're seeing tent cities pop up all over the state and the country. Is we're seeing tent cities and encampments because it's just becoming really unaffordable. And that word affordable and unaffordable is really a play on politics. Not going to go there today, but Hugh, thank you for dropping that in, because I know folks who are listening, I don't know if they realize how the serial tenant is out here abusing the system. And that's what we come up with, right? Especially, this is why I shared, if you've got a vacant property, register that property with the police department as a vacant property, so someone does not come in and squat. And when we prepare to go to market or sell that property, they're claiming that they're a tenant and we owe them relocation money. Don't you dare. Don't you dare. I've got this place registered with the police department. If you need the form, send me an email. I've got the form. You fill it out, you sign, you get it notarized, and you drop it right down to the police department. They know what to do with it. You'll have to you'll take a photo of the property. You post a no trespassing sign, and you check a box and say that you've done these things. You've let the public know that there's no one to be on site. And we've had to do that. We continue to do that when we're dealing with the estates and the sales of these properties. We have to call. I've called multiple times and let them know, hey, I'm the broker of record. I am calling because this property is registered with your agency. There's no one to be on the property. We got to call that someone is on the porch, right? Someone got into the property. They're in the backyard. No one is to be on that property. Arrest on site. It's called the trespass arrest authorization form. Trespass authorization form. Okay, guys, I'm getting ready to wrap up, but this is a good one. This is a juicy one to see what's going on out there. And this is very important because, again, I'm seeing so many multifamily units out there. And I think we just got to do our job, right, as professionals, to communicate to our clients who are working with the mom and pop landlords of how the tenant situation, the condition of the property, the low rents, whatever's going on, we got to really coach them through to understanding how that affects the bottom line. And it also affects the pool of buyers that will even consider that property, which is why you're seeing so many properties sit on the market for so long, extended period of time. Okay. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. With that being said, all right, this was fun. It was great seeing you today. I trust you have a productive week. We'll see you next week. Same channel, same time, same place, right here on your favorite radio podcast, and catch the replay on Spotify. All right, guys, take care. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Ready, Set Real Estate Podcast with Lisa Gillett, the LA Super Agent. Please like, subscribe, and share LA Super Agent everywhere on your favorite podcast